Thank you. That concludes general questions. The next item of business is First Minister's questions, and I call Russell Finlay, question number 1.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Child cancer patients Millie Main and Molly Cuddihy. Adult patients Gail Armstrong and Tony Dines. 2 other children, names and ages unknown. All patients at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, where they contracted infections and died. Dozens more child patients also contracted serious infections. For years, families suspected that the infections were caused by the hospital's water supply. But they were lied to and smeared. NHS staff who raised concerns were bullied and silenced. The people of Scotland were told there was no problem. But now, after years of lies and deception, NHS bosses admit that it's likely that some infections were caused by the water supply. John Swinney has so far refused to release all of the information that his government holds about this scandal. Will he now do so?
First Minister. Presiding Officer, first of all, I want to express my sympathies to all of those who are grieving the loss of a loved one in these circumstances. I recognise the deep pain, the grief and the hurt felt by patients and their families who provided brave testimony throughout all of these years on the issues that Russell Finlay raises with me. Now, clearly the issues emerged in the course of the last few years, and as a consequence of that, the Scottish Government established a public inquiry led by Lord Brodie to establish the truth about what has happened in this case. And I have every confidence that Lord Brodie, in taking the evidence that he has taken, will provide the open scrutiny and the truth that is required by the families and by everybody else. Now, the Government has shared all relevant evidence that addresses the terms of reference of the inquiry. Nonetheless, if there is anything further related to the business of government, whether that's Cabinet minutes or ministerial correspondence, not submitted to the inquiry, then I am happy to release this, subject to any appropriate redactions, such as personal information and the respecting of legal professional privilege.
Russell Finlay.
John Swinney's commitment is welcome, but it should not have taken this long, and there can be no backsliding. The families will be watching. I pay tribute to these families. I cannot begin to imagine the pain they have suffered. I'm in awe of their determination and their dignity. And I think that it's important for Mr Swinney to hear what they are saying. And I quote, "We were all lied to, we were all disbelieved, we were all demeaned and smeared. We have had our families devastated and our lives traumatised. We cannot overstate the level of deceit and conniving cowardice of Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board. These families quite rightly expect accountability. They demand a reckoning for the board's leadership. So will John Swinney sack those responsible?"
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, first of all, I acknowledge the pain and the suffering that the relatives of those affected by these circumstances have suffered, and the pain of the loss of their loved ones has been compounded by the tenacious efforts they have had to go to ensure that the truth would be established, which is precisely why the Scottish Government took the decision in 2019 to establish a public inquiry led by Lord Brodie, which, as I said in my first answer, will be determined to get to the truth. Now, there are a variety of issues that we have to await the outcome of the inquiry from Lord Brodie. But what I will say to Russell Finlay today is that in all circumstances, the Government will take seriously all recommendations from Lord Brodie in taking forward the issues that have to be addressed as a consequence of the commissioning of a public inquiry into this issue.
Russell Finlay.
We wouldn't need to spend hundreds of millions of pounds on public inquiries if public bodies simply told the truth. And it's no wonder these families are so angry. The Health Board has not been held to account, but neither has anyone in this government. Nicola Sturgeon was First Minister when the hospital began treating patients on the 27th of April 2015, just 10 days before a general election. During the SNP election campaign, she kept bragging about the new hospital. For years, Nicola Sturgeon dismissed growing concerns about infections being linked to the water supply. But now, the NHS have dropped the bombshell. They've told the public inquiry. Pressure was applied to open the hospital on time and on budget. And it is now clear that the hospital opened too early. It was not ready. So let me ask John Swinney a straight question. Did Nicola Sturgeon or anyone else in the SNP government apply political pressure to open the hospital before it was ready?
First Minister.
The direct answer to that question is no.
Russell Finlay.
Well, if the Scottish Government didn't apply pressure, who did? And why did they do so? This is one of many serious scandals involving Scotland's public bodies in recent years, from Police Scotland, the Crown Office, the NHS and more. This SNP government presides over a cynical culture defined by arrogance, secrecy and cover-up. A culture of zero accountability that misuses taxpayers' money to crush victims and to silence concerns, and which treats grieving families with utter contempt. The families of the hospital infection scandal are not going away. This is not over. They say that the hospital is still unsafe for patients and that the management cannot be trusted to make it safe. They continue. The people of Scotland demand it to be made safe. So how does John Swinney intend to protect patients and rebuild public confidence in Scotland's largest hospital?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I reject the characterisation of the government that Russell Finlay puts to me. And I would cite as an example of that the fact that the government commissioned a public inquiry to look at this very issue. I also would draw on the fact that the government has established public inquiries to look at other major issues where patients have expressed their concern. For example, the inquiry in NHS Tayside about the conduct of Mr El Jamel in his surgery practice, or the issues relating to the death of Sheikh Ubayu. So the government is, and I accept the fundamental point that Mr Finlay makes, that it would be better if we didn't have to have these public inquiries, but when things happen, we have to be prepared to take the steps to investigate and to get to the truth. Now, Mr Finlay raises with me issues of a current nature about the circumstances in the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in relation to the safety of the water system. And Lord Brodie, the chair of the hospital's inquiry, commissioned reports and audits from the inquiry expert Andrew Poplett on water and ventilation. Mr Poplett's view is that the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital's current procedures for managing the water system are suitable and safe. Providing the evidence to the inquiry in September 2025, Mr Poplett observed that after previously raising concerns, which he did, the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital water system is, and I quote, currently extremely well managed, close quotes, and there had been, quotes, significant improvements, close quotes, made. So that is independent advice that's been provided to Lord Brodie's inquiry, which I put on the record today to reassure members of the public that the safety considerations in the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital are uppermost in the thinking and the minds of Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board, and obviously the Government wants to have that assurance, and that inquiry report, I think, provides exactly that. And the last thing I would say is that it is important, vital, absolutely fundamental, that patients who are using hospitals, families that are using hospitals, are assured of the determination to ensure we have a safe clinical environment. And Scotland has advanced a lot of work which has attracted international commendation on the support for patient safety, and that will be one of the key priorities of the Government in making sure that the public can rely on such circumstances in our hospitals right around the country.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, much of John Swinney's answers are simply not credible. This week, NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde said of the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, pressure was applied to open the hospital on time and on budget, and it is now clear that the hospital opened too early. It was not ready. That hospital opened with contaminated water, which infected people and led to the death of at least 2 children. And weeks before the Children's Hospital opened, this internal report warned of a high risk of infections and therefore a high risk to life for immunocompromised patients. It was ignored. Pressure was applied and the hospital opened anyway with devastating consequences. So who applied that pressure and why?
First Minister.
President Officer, there are 2 points that I would make to Mr Sarwar. The first is that, as he correctly says, the hospital opened in 2015. The Scottish Government was advised by NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde of a water contamination problem was on the 1st of March 2018. So long after the report that Mr Sarwar raises with me. And the second point is that Mr Sarwar raises with me a point which is absolutely fundamental to the conduct of the public inquiry which Lord Brodie is undertaking. And I acknowledge the significant public interest in this issue, which is why Lord Brodie must have the opportunity to consider and to reflect on the evidence and to set out his conclusions.
Anna Sarwar.
Officer, again, that answer is not credible. It's either at least negligence or more likely criminal incompetence if the Government is suggesting this report was never seen. When this hospital opened, Nicola Sturgeon was the First Minister, John Swinney was the Deputy First Minister and the Finance Secretary who signed the cheques, and Shona Robeson was the Health Secretary. They received this report weeks before the hospital opened, warning of high risks of infections. They ignored it, opened anyway, and children died as a result. For 7 years, families have been lied to. Whistleblowers have been bullied, gaslit and punished, and those who raised concerns were dismissed and patronised. Pressure was applied to open the hospital before it was ready, even though it had contaminated water that risked lives. So I ask John Swinney again, who applied that pressure and why?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, these issues are the substance of the public inquiry, and as I've indicated in my answers already, the Government clearly expected the hospital to open. Preparations were being taken to do that, and the operational responsibility for that lay with NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. And these issues are the substance of the inquiry that Lord Brodie must undertake. Now, Mr Sarwar said in his question that the experience of whistleblowers and staff and patients and families has been completely unacceptable. And I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And that's why the Government set up a public inquiry, because we were so concerned about the circumstances and we felt it was necessary to have a judicially led inquiry to get to the truth, to satisfy the legitimate concerns that exist. And that is what Lord Brodie will reflect on in the course of completing his report.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, if Jean Freeman could see a report and stop the opening of a hospital in Edinburgh, why couldn't Nicola Sturgeon, John Swinney and Shona Robeson? That gets the heart of the issue right here, because this is the biggest scandal in the history of this Parliament. I first raised this case 7 years ago when whistleblowers came to me with devastating evidence that children had died due to infections, but their parents had never been told the true cause of their death. One of those parents was Kimberly Darroch, the mother of Millie Main. Millie was in remission, but died after contracting an infection from the water. She was 10 years old. Millie was forced to fight not only cancer, but an unseen danger inside those hospital walls. And every step of the way, the Health Board and countless SNP ministers closed ranks and denied there was a problem. People have died. Their families deserve the truth. A hospital was opened too soon with contaminated water, which infected patients, which led to deaths. And the health boards say pressure was applied to open it before it was safe. So for the third time, tell the truth. The Health Secretary at the time is sitting right next to the First Minister. He was the Deputy First Minister and the Finance Secretary. They could ask Nicola Sturgeon too. Tell the truth. Who applied the pressure and why?
First Minister.
I've already answered that question to Mr Finlay in the answers that I set out. And what I would say to...
Let's hear the First Minister.
What I would say to...
Let's hear the First Minister.
Is that when the government became aware of these issues, when the water contamination incident was raised with the government on the 1st of March 2018, there then followed a sequence of events that led to the establishment of a public inquiry, which is to get to the truth about all of these issues.
First Minister, sorry, I'm very keen to ensure that everyone in this chamber, those in the gallery, can hear what's being said. First Minister.
So the circumstances, once the government had these reported to the government in March 2018, there then put in place a sequence of events that resulted in the establishment of the public inquiry, the substance of which is considering all of this evidence. And that is what the government has done to make sure that we face up to the issues that are raised here, and that we provide answers to the family of Millie Mayne and others who have suffered so significantly as a consequence. And that's the commitment the government has put in place, and that is the commitment that Lord Brodie will fulfil.
Question number 3, Gillian Mackay.
There is often very little that unites football fans. But in recent weeks, supporters of Celtic, Falkirk and Motherwell have displayed banners backing my calls for a £25 cap on away tickets, a call that's also been backed by the Scottish Supporters Collective. Football is meant to be for everyone, but at a time where the cost of living is ever rising, there are fans being priced out of attending. There are already price caps in place in England and in many other European countries. We know how important attending games is for people. It reduces loneliness, not to mention the wonderful work the trusts at these clubs do for the wider community. Clubs would be nothing without their fans. So will the First Minister join me in the calls to cap away ticket prices?
First Minister.
Sir, I'm very happy to give consideration to this particular issue. I think for all the reasons that Gillian Mackay indicates, it is important that individuals are able to engage in watching their football teams and being able to enjoy that experience and to appreciate the solidarity of being together with fellow football fans. And I certainly will give active consideration to the proposal that Gillian Mackay has raised.
Gillian Mackay.
120,000 people will attend games over the weekend, but we currently have a system where outside a few clubs, fans struggle to have their voices heard, and at a national level, this is even more difficult. Whether it's ticket prices or fan ownership, we need to bring our sport closer to the people who make it what it is. In the months ahead, I plan to host a summit with supporters groups from across the country to discuss how we democratise Scottish football at every level and make it truly for the fans. Will the First Minister join that summit and help to put fans at the heart of our national game? First Minister.
The Government's already held discussions on many of these issues about fan ownership and fan engagement in football, and of course there are a number of very good examples around the country of fan ownership and leadership of football clubs, which has delivered significant results for participation in sport. So I'm very happy for the Sport Minister to be involved in those discussions. She's very actively involved in all of these questions about fan engagement, and if that helps to advance a sense of collective purpose within Scotland, then the Government will support that in every way it can.
Question number 4, Christine Graham.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister regarding the proposed expansion of wind turbines, battery storage facilities and pylons across the Scottish borders, whether the Scottish Government has carried out an assessment of the potential cumulative impact on the wildlife and the landscape in light of the importance of tourism to the area.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I completely understand the concerns of communities regarding the cumulative impact of energy infrastructure. Where new development proposals come forward, they are subject to site-specific assessments which should take into consideration cumulative effects of developments alongside potential impacts on communities, nature and cultural heritage. I appreciate the point that Christine Graham makes on cumulative impact, and I have asked that work is taken forward to consider what further steps we can take as part of our strategic spatial energy plan. Through the plan, we will work to balance the need to deliver net zero with the need to protect our natural environment, tourism and rural communities.
Christine Graham.
I thank the First Minister for his answer, and I do hope there's progress. So to give some context, I understand there are 30 wind turbines in the Borders operating over 440, 30 sites operating over 440 turbines, with 3 more being built and others being applied for. Add to that the SP Energy Network, the project Cross Borders Connection, which will require, as I understand it, 400 pylons taking Borders-generated energy to England, without a doubt impacting on the beautiful landscape and the communities. That application, like the other applications, notwithstanding what the First Minister has said, it seems to me to be taken in isolation, segmented parts, not cumulative. Now, that cannot be fair, First Minister, when it certainly leaves communities getting absolutely nothing out of this but an industrialised landscape.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the issues of cumulative impact are a legitimate consideration in the planning process, and it is important that those issues are reflected in decisions, and indeed there will have been examples of developments which have not been able to proceed because of the concerns about cumulative impact. But I hope that what I have said in my substantive answer to Christine Graham gives her the reassurance that the issues at stake can be and should be considered in the planning process, and that the consideration that we are giving to the implications for the Strategic Spatial Energy Plan will assist in addressing the point that Christine Graham has raised with me.
Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister says he understands the concerns of Borders residents, but I don't think he does. I attended the South of Scotland Energy Convention on Saturday, where the Scottish Conservatives showed their support for Highlands and the North East in calling for urgent action on the uncontrolled spread of energy infrastructure through a unified statement. Will the First Minister back my amendments on a moratorium on new energy applications and also a cumulative impact assessment in the natural environment to prove that he is supporting Borders communities?
First Minister.
Obviously, the Government will look at all of the issues that come forward in relation to the Natural Environment Bill and determine its position. But I simply repeat to Rachel Hamilton what I've said to Christine Graham, that the issues of cumulative impact are material issues to be considered in the planning process, and the steps that we are taking in relation to the further analysis in relation to the Strategic Spatial Energy Plan will be designed to address the points that Rachel Hamilton puts to me on behalf of her constituents, as we make the sensible balances between the protection of our natural environment and the ability to ensure that Scotland benefits from the abundant renewable energy that we will have to develop to provide energy security in the years to come.
Craig Hoy, briefly please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Last year I wrote to the First Minister asking for him to support a moratorium on all BESS, pylon, solar and wind farms across the south of Scotland. As Rachel Hamilton just said, this weekend community councils added their voice. Why is this First Minister not listening to rural Scotland?
Yes. First Minister.
I can assure Craig Hoy that I listen to rural Scotland all the time, since I represent a large part of rural Scotland in my constituency representation. And what we are trying to do is to work with communities and to work to ensure that Scotland is able to have access to sustainable energy that will provide us with energy security in the years to come, and that lies at the heart of the policy direction of the Government.
Question number 5, Miles Briggs.
Ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government is taking to address the reported issues with teacher job shortages caused by temporary teacher contracts.
First Minister.
President Officer, the latest data shows that for the first time in 3 years, the number of teachers in our schools has increased. We are also seeing encouraging progress in recruitment. More teacher induction scheme probationers are securing a teaching post, whether permanent or temporary, in the year following their probation. This government understands how essential it is to have great teachers in every classroom, and the challenges in recruitment in some subjects and local areas must be addressed. That's why I am pleased to announce today that we are launching a national recruitment campaign to encourage more people into secondary teaching, particularly in the subjects and areas where recruitment is most challenging.
Miles Briggs.
Well, the government's own analysis shows that most newly qualified teachers in Scotland are no longer getting permanent jobs. 2,294 newly qualified teachers completed their probation. However, only 25% of them have secured permanent posts. EIS General Secretary Andrea Bradley says these figures released confirm that the Scottish Government has absolutely failed to deliver on their 2021 manifesto commitment. First Minister, after 19 years of this SNP government, why have ministers spectacularly failed in their workforce planning and the pledge they made to both parents, professionals and young people? And what does the First Minister say to young qualified teachers in Scotland now considering leaving our country because of this government's disastrous education workforce planning?
First Minister.
There has been an increase in post-probation employment from this year compared to last year, which demonstrates the progress that has been made. We also have in place a lower pupil-teacher ratio in Scotland compared to other parts of the United Kingdom, and a higher number of teachers per 100,000 pupils in Scotland compared to other parts of the United Kingdom. So the Government recognises the importance of investing in teacher education and in education services. That's why the Government has increased the budget available to local authorities through the Government's budget announced last week, and we will continue to work with our local authority partners to ensure that we strengthen recruitment of teachers and to encourage and motivate more individuals to join the teaching profession.
Paul O'Kane.
It was this First Minister at the beginning of this Parliament who promised a focus on recovery from the pandemic in education. He made a pledge around 3,500 more teachers, permanent teachers, in this Parliament, and yet he will spectacularly fail on that pledge. And yet, according to the Cabinet Secretary, it appears to not be the responsibility of this government. Rather, it's the fault of teachers themselves. She said, and I quote, "They're opting not to travel to jobs," or "they are much more expensive to employ." So can I ask the First Minister, does he agree with Jenny Gilruth's analysis of the situation? Does he think that underemployed and unemployed teachers across the country should have to uproot their lives and their families because of his government's failure to competently put together a workforce plan?
First Minister.
The Government has had in place for many years incentives to encourage individuals to move to areas of the country where there are shortages of teachers, and there are challenges in place in some of those locations, which is exactly why the Government has intervened to try to put in place those incentives to ensure that can be achieved. But Mr O'Kane rather skates past the improvements that have been made in Scottish education, with record levels of literacy and numeracy in our schools as we speak, with a tremendous exam diet of achievements that have been made by the young people of Scotland. There is tremendous strength in Scottish education, and Mr O'Kane should join those of us who are very proud of it.
Willie Rennie.
When John Swinney was Education Secretary, he instructed the recruitment of thousands of extra teachers, but failed to ensure there was enough permanent jobs for them. The result is that thousands are on precarious zero-hours contracts. Isn't it the case that despite all the fine rhetoric from this government about workers' rights, it's got the worst workers' rights record of this Parliament? And finally, when are these people finally going to get a job?
First Minister.
What I'd say to Mr Rennie is that teachers in Scotland are the best paid in the United Kingdom as a consequence of the pay deals put in place.
First Minister, the thing that I find really frustrating is I know how many members wish to put a question in this session, and every time I have to stop business, another member is being deprived of that opportunity. Please, let's hear one another. First Minister.
President Officer, the The steps that the Government has taken have been to improve teachers' pay and conditions, and as a consequence, and as I recounted these figures to Mr Sarwar last week, teachers in Scotland are much better paid and have much better take-home pay than teachers in the rest of the United Kingdom. We have more teachers per head of population in Scotland than other parts of the United Kingdom, and also a lower pupil-teacher ratio in Scotland. That's the Government investing to deliver on our commitments on education, and we intend to continue to do so.
Question number 6, Katie Clark.
To ask the First Minister whether the Scottish Government will comply with the Scottish Information Commissioner's ruling that files relating to James Hamilton's investigation into whether the former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon broke the Ministerial Code must be published by 22nd January 2026.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government will comply with the Commissioner's decision and will do so as soon as practically possible. I do not expect this will take much longer. The courts have made it clear the identities of those who complained in relation to allegations of sexual assault must have their identities protected, and there are no circumstances in which I will do anything that risks breaking those court orders. I cannot release information which would breach those court orders and amount to a contempt of court.
Katie Clark.
The Scottish Government has wasted millions of pounds of taxpayers' money fighting court cases, with 2 further appeals relating to the Salmon files before the Court of Session later this month. Will the First Minister ensure full disclosure by releasing all of the Salmon files? And if he won't commit to this today, will he at least release information which has not been contested through the appeals process? And if the Scottish Government loses the appeals, will he commit to not using his veto? My Freedom of Information Reform Bill would strengthen the powers of the Information Commissioner, preventing the late disclosure of information, which happened here, introduce proactive disclosure and abolish the First Minister's veto. Will he look closely at my bill, which is supported by the current Information Commissioner and all the previous holders of the role, as it would help deliver openness, accountability and transparency, which were the founding principles of this Parliament?
First Minister.
We will, of course, look at the bill and consider its contents, but it is really important that I am clear with Parliament why the Government is acting in the way that it is acting. The Scottish Government has handled nearly 90 Freedom of Information requests and reviews relating to the James Hamilton investigation. We are also responding to 96% of information requests on time against a backdrop of rising request numbers. In relation to the particular case that Katie Clark raises with me, the Government will comply with the Commissioner's decision, but I have to be absolutely satisfied that there is no risk that court orders that protect the identities of individuals who have complained in relation to allegations of sexual assault are in any way disclosed as a consequence. I will be clear with Parliament, I will not do that. And I'm very surprised that Katie Clark wants me to release all of the information, because if I released all of the information, I would breach court orders, and I will not do that. So the Government is appealing 2 other cases which we believe would result in us committing contempt of court, and I will not do that. So the Government has, as I've said already, has handled nearly 90 Freedom of Information requests, but I have a legal responsibility. I have a responsibility in the Ministerial Code to obey the court orders that are in place, and I want to be crystal clear with Parliament. I will do nothing to jeopardise that.
Fergus Ewing.
But what the First Minister hasn't said, presiding officer, is that James Hamilton, when he produced his report, himself, in public, in an unprecedented move, expressed his severe reservations with the redactions that he was required to make. And moreover, the orders made regarding the release of further information have been made by David Hamilton, the Freedom of Information Commissioner. Now, the First Minister will accept that both James and David Hamilton are individuals of the highest repute and integrity and they would not invite him to do anything that was illegal. So my question is this: isn't the First Minister using the excuse of jigsaw identification as a human shield, as a pretext for declining to release information, because the real reason is it will cause extreme embarrassment to several people who are in the Scottish Government now and previously were in that trusted position?
First Minister.
I cannot find it in myself to associate myself with the words that Mr Ewing has made of the, quote, excuse of jigsaw identification. Because that question lies at the very heart of the provision of statute in this country. And my duty as First Minister at all times is to obey the law. And Mr Ewing is inviting me to be cavalier with the orders that have been passed by a court in this country, and I want to be crystal clear with Parliament, I will do not one bit of it.
Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I wonder if the First Minister appreciates what a bad look it is for his government to be spending huge sums of taxpayers' money contesting rulings from the Independent Information Commissioner. David Hamilton is an experienced and respected professional who has spent his entire career in Scotland's justice system. Does the First Minister really think he would be asking the Scottish Government to do something that would be unlawful?
First Minister.
The Government has made clear that we believe the Information Commissioner has erred in law in relation to two of the cases that the Government is appealing. And Mr Fraser is a lawyer. He knows full well the obligations that I carry as First Minister to ensure that the Government at all times complies with the law. And where I believe there is a risk of jeopardy in that respect, I will ensure that the Government acts within the law, and that's exactly what I'm doing.
Thank you. We move to constituency and general supplementaries, and I call Emma Roddick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Developers have warned that the planned West of Orkney wind farm, which has the potential to power 2 million homes by the end of the decade, will not be built unless unfair UK transmission charges are overhauled. Under Westminster control, the UK energy market is broken. Communities don't benefit from hosting development. Developers are penalised for being in Scotland, and this is taking a toll on jobs, investment and ultimately costs, which leads to higher energy bills. Does the First Minister agree that powers over Scotland's energy should be placed in Scotland's hands? First Minister.
Well, Presiding Officer, Emma Roddick raises significant concerns about the West of Orkney wind farm, which have been raised by the developer, which is a development that would bring enormous benefit to the people of Scotland, but it is put in jeopardy because of the disproportionate transmission charges of the United Kingdom regime. So the sooner we can ensure that we have the control over these issues in the hands of the people of Scotland so we can benefit from the energy wealth of Scotland, the better, and that can only happen with independence.
Ros McCall.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister will be aware of concerns raised by the Scottish Childminding Association regarding planned changes by HMRC to making tax digital and the long-standing tax-free wear and tear allowance for childminders. The allowance permitted registered childminders to claim 10% of their income tax as tax-free, given that they're opening their homes to children and the evident wear and tear which comes as a result of this. Now, the tax changes are due to the introduction in England and Wales of childminding in a non-domestic premises, which does not apply in Scotland. And the changes will require childminders to claim on a case-by-case basis should damage occur in their properties as a result of the occupation, adding additional admin and complexity to a burgeoning sector. Now, the childminding workforce in Scotland has declined by 48% since 2016, with an increase in paperwork cited as the main reason for this decline. So childminders currently looking at whether they can make a decision about their future business model based on this. So can I ask the First Minister, in the light of this, what assessment has the Government made of the impact on childcare capacity in Scotland of the HMRC's decision, and what urgent representations can be made to the UK Government to try and halt this?
First Minister.
President Officer, I'm not familiar with the issue that Ros McCall raises with me, so I'll take that away and explore it. It is, of course, from my listening to her question, an issue that's been advanced by HMRC, which of course is a United Kingdom organisation, but it obviously will have implications in Scotland. But I will consider the points and write to Ros McCall about what steps the Government can take.
Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The forthcoming Scottish Budget commits a record £513.4 million next financial year for ferry services. Yet CalMac proposes swinging cuts to this summer's timetable to and from Cumbria. They seek to reduce sailings from 4 to 3 per hour while introducing a disruptive maintenance schedule that will reduce sailings even further. These proposals will impact connectivity, the island economy, make attending hospital appointments more difficult, reduce CalMac's income and have zero justification other than CalMac's own convenience. Will the First Minister ensure that these damaging service reductions don't happen?
First Minister.
Sir, I understand how significant an issue this is for Mr Gibson and his constituents. The ferry service to Cumbria is a very well used and very busy route, and particularly in the summer period. And the Cabinet Secretary for Transport is meeting with CalMac next week to discuss in detail the current proposals around maintenance of vessels and loading and unloading activities alongside other matters. So I give Mr Gibson the assurance that the Transport Secretary will raise with CalMac the issues that he has put to me today. CalMac are in the process of reviewing options and will continue to work closely with the Cumbria community to ensure that any proposals are fully discussed before any final decisions are taken or implemented. But the Transport Secretary has heard these exchanges and I know will take that issue forward with Calder and McBrain.
Thank you, Bailey.
I've been contacted by social care organisations, Unite the Union, the GMB, about a gap in the Scottish Government's budget for social care pay. COSLA has calculated £19 million funding shortfall in meeting the cost of the real living wage for social care staff on the basis of the wrong baseline being used. Everyone assumed that this was an accounting mistake, but the Finance Minister yesterday confirmed that the funding gap was deliberate. The First Minister will be aware that services will be cut, staff, the majority of whom are low-paid women workers, will lose their jobs if this gap is not addressed. So can I ask him, will he support social care and will he fill the £19 million gap?
First Minister.
Well, the government is fulfilling its commitments to social care, and it is supporting investment in social care by the provisions in the budget. And I look forward to Jackie Bailey's support for the budget to make sure that it delivers for the social care sector.
Oliver Mundell.
Thank you. Thank you, Presiding Officer. As those at home and around the world, including here in our own Parliament, raise a dram this week to the continued social, economic and cultural importance of Robert Burns, the campaign to save the home of Old Lang Syne, Ellisland, the Dumfriesshire farm the poet built and called home, is building momentum, and it's where he wrote many of his most famous works. With the project to restore this nationally significant site, it's so important to local residents in Dumfriesshire and Burns fans. Will the First Minister reaffirm his government's full support for the project, and will he agree to visit Ellisland and join Scots and visitors from around the world in experiencing for himself what Burns called sweet poetic ground?
First Minister.
I have observed a lot of fantastic work that's been done at Ellisland Farm to preserve and to enhance the facility and to ensure that it can play its role in the celebration of the outstanding and timeless work of Robert Burns. So I am very happy to reaffirm to Oliver Mundell the support and the encouragement of the Government for the work that is underway. There is work that has been taken forward which involves attracting funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, South of Scotland Enterprise and Museums and Galleries Scotland. And I would encourage the Robert Burns Ellisland Trust to continue engaging with Museum Galleries Scotland in taking forward their plans. I'd be delighted to visit the Elsland Farm and to see first-hand the plans that are being taken forward and to give my very active support. And it is a daily experience for me to walk past the Naismith portrait of Robert Burns that hangs in the drawing room of Butte House, where it should hang as a tribute to the timeless commitment and work of Robert Burns, which we celebrate at this time of year and which has such an underpinning of the values of our country.
McLennan.
The Head of Scotland for Save the Children has welcomed the SNP Scottish Government's budget plans for a top-up on the Scottish Child Payment for families with a baby under 1. She said this week this crucial extra support can't come soon enough for families. We hope it receives cross-party support in Parliament. Will the FM join me in calling on opposition members to listen to Save the Children and back this SNP Scottish budget so that we can deliver landmark policies like this to continue our work to eradicate child poverty?
First Minister.
The point that Paul McLennan makes is an important one. The Scottish Government underpins the support for the Scottish Child Payment, which is helping to keep children out of poverty in Scotland and to deliver a falling level of child poverty in Scotland. From 27-28, the Government will deliver a boost to the Scottish Child Payment to £40 per week for all children under 1, which Save the Children has said will sow the seeds of a brighter tomorrow. And I would encourage members of all parties to support the Government's budget, which makes provision for these aspirations.
And Jeremy Balfour.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister will be aware of the disgraceful vandalism of the Edinburgh Central Mosque last week. What is the Scottish Government doing to address this intolerance displayed in this action? And what assurances can he give to all religious communities in Scotland that don't feel safe following attacks like this?
First Minister.
First of all, I was deeply troubled to hear of the vandalism at the Central Mosque in Edinburgh, and associate myself entirely with Mr Balfour's points that nobody should be on the receiving end of hatred in our society today. I regularly meet, as does the Social Justice Secretary and the Minister for Equalities, with various groups in Scotland to ensure that we are acting together to tackle hate in our society. There are groupings in our society, the Muslim community on this occasion, on other occasions, I've had representations from the Jewish community in Scotland who are on the receiving end of hate. And what the Government is doing is supporting communities, investing in the cohesive communities work that we undertake to make sure that Scotland is a country free of hatred, as it should be.
That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Emma Roddick. There will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the Chamber and the public gallery to do so.